The worst decisions are not the ones you make. They are the ones you keep making because you are afraid to disappoint everyone else. I have seen people cry in expensive restaurants. I have seen people cry inside luxury hotels. I have seen grown men cry after losing fortunes large enough to buy entire city blocks. But until that rainy afternoon, I had never seen a bride cry on her wedding day. The rain had arrived without warning. Thick gray clouds swallowed the sky above Chicago just after noon. Water rushed down the stained glass windows of St. Matthew's Church while guests hurried inside holding umbrellas and covering carefully styled hair. My driver slowed the car as traffic backed up near the intersection. I glanced toward the church only because it was impossible not to notice the crowd. White flowers lined the entrance. Luxury vehicles filled both sides of the street. Clearly someone had spent a fortune creating the perfect wedding. Then I saw her. At first, she was just a flash of white moving through the rain. A bride running away from her own ceremony. My attention followed her automatically. She disappeared behind the church and into a narrow courtyard surrounded by old brick walls. Something about the image stayed with me. Maybe it was the way she ran. Not like someone late for an event. Like someone escaping one. I should have ignored it. I had meetings waiting downtown. Investors. Contracts. Problems that supposedly mattered. Yet 30 seconds later, I found myself stepping out of the car. "Mr. Romano?" my driver called. 5 minutes. I closed the door before he could argue. Rain soaked my suit jacket almost immediately. Water splashed across the pavement as I walked behind the church. The courtyard was empty except for one person. She stood beneath a stone archway with her back turned toward me. Her wedding dress was beautiful. Elegant. Expensive. Completely ruined by rain. Wet fabric clung to the ground around her feet. Her veil hung loosely from one shoulder. And she was crying. Not quietly. Not dramatically. Just enough that I could see her shoulders shaking. For a moment I considered leaving. Whatever had happened was obviously personal. Then she wiped her eyes and looked up. Our gazes met. Neither of us spoke. Rain echoed against stone and brick. Somewhere inside the church, an organ began playing. The ceremony was starting. Yet the bride was standing outside with a stranger. "You are going to catch a cold," I said. It was probably the least useful thing anyone had ever said to a crying woman. To my surprise, a short laugh escaped her. That would actually improve my day. Her voice trembled slightly. I stepped beneath the archway to escape the rain. Up close, she looked younger than I expected. Mid-20s. Blonde hair. Blue eyes. Mascara blurred by tears. Beautiful, but too exhausted to care about it. "Bad day?" I asked. Another laugh. This one closer to disbelief. "You see a woman hiding behind a church in a wedding dress and that is your question? Fair point. I have been told I am not great at small talk." She studied me for several seconds. "You are not a guest." "No, family." "Definitely not." That earned the first genuine smile. Tiny, brief, but real. Then the smile disappeared as quickly as it came. The organ music grew louder inside the church. Her eyes drifted toward the sound. Fear appeared in them. Not nervousness. Fear. The kind people feel when they realize they are standing at the edge of a decision that could change everything. "They are waiting for you," I said quietly. She swallowed hard. "I know." Yet she did not move. Neither did I. Something told me this moment was bigger than cold feet. Bigger than wedding nerves. The rain continued falling around us while guests filled the church only yards away. Then she looked directly at me and whispered 5 words that changed the entire afternoon. "I do not think I can." For several seconds neither of us spoke. Rain continued falling beyond the stone archway, while the wedding ceremony waited inside the church. The organ music echoed through the walls like a countdown neither of us could stop. Claire Bennett stood in front of me wearing a wedding dress and looking completely trapped. Not by a person. Not by the weather. By a decision she no longer believed in. "I do not think I can." Her words lingered in the air. Most people would have immediately started offering advice. Go through with it. Follow your heart. Think about your family. Think about the guests. Instead, I asked the only question that seemed to matter. "Do you want to?" Claire blinked. Confusion crossed her face. Then surprise. "What? Do you want to marry him?" The question seemed almost too simple. Yet judging by her reaction, nobody had asked it. She looked away immediately. Her eyes focused on the rain spilling from the church roof. Everyone keeps asking if I am nervous. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Nobody asks if I am happy. That answer told me more than anything else could have. I leaned against the stone wall and waited. People reveal the truth when they are given enough silence. Eventually Claire laughed bitterly. You know the strange part? What? 300 people are sitting inside that church. She glanced toward the sanctuary. And somehow I am having the most honest conversation of the day with a stranger. I smiled slightly. That probably says something about the people inside. For the first time she laughed for real. It lasted only a second, but it was enough to change the atmosphere. Then her expression softened again. My father loves him. The groom. She nodded. My friends love him. My family loves him. Everyone says he is perfect. Do you? Claire did not answer immediately. That silence became an answer of its own. Rainwater dripped from the edge of her veil. Somewhere nearby, church bells rang softly. I used to think I did, she admitted. Maybe I convinced myself I did. Her eyes filled with tears again. And now? I asked. She looked directly at me. Now I feel like I am watching someone else's life. Those words hit harder than she intended. Because I understood them. More than she knew. Entire industries were built by people chasing lives they never truly wanted. Success. Status. Expectations. Applause. Sometimes people became prisoners of their own plans. Claire looked down at her wedding ring resting inside a small velvet box she still carried. I spent 2 years planning today. That is a long time. Exactly. Her voice cracked. What kind of person walks away after 2 years? I thought about that carefully. Maybe the kind who finally became honest. She stared at me. The rain seemed quieter now. Less like a storm and more like background noise. What if I disappoint everyone? She asked. You will. The answer surprised her. That is not very comforting. It is not supposed to be. I met her gaze. No matter what you choose, someone will be disappointed. She looked away again. Then what do I do? For a moment, I watched guests arriving through the church entrance carrying gifts and flowers. An entire future seemed to be waiting only a few yards away. Then I looked back at Claire. Answer one question honestly. Her breathing slowed. What question? I glanced toward the sanctuary doors. Then back at the frightened bride standing beside me. If nobody else existed for the next 5 minutes, would you still walk into that church? Claire stared at me as if the question itself had opened a door she had spent years pretending did not exist. Rain continued falling beyond the archway. The church bells faded into the distance. Somewhere inside, guests were still waiting. Yet for several long seconds, the entire world seemed to narrow to a single question. If nobody else existed for the next 5 minutes, would you still walk into that church? Her lips parted slightly. Then she looked away. I already knew the answer before she spoke. No, the word was barely audible, almost swallowed by the rain. Yet it carried more weight than anything else she had said that afternoon. Claire closed her eyes. Tears slipped down her cheeks again. No, she repeated, stronger this time. I would not. Something changed the moment she said it aloud. Not around us. Inside her. The truth has a strange effect on people. Even painful truth creates a kind of relief. For the first time since I had found her behind the church, some of the panic disappeared from her expression. Fear remained. Uncertainty remained. But at least she was no longer fighting herself. Then you know what you need to do, I said quietly. Claire laughed sadly. You make it sound simple. Simple and easy are different things. She nodded slowly. Everyone is in there. Her eyes drifted toward the church. My father. My friends. My future in-laws. She swallowed hard. The groom. I noticed she still had not said his name. That detail mattered more than she realized. People speak the names of those they love. They avoid the names of those they are trying to convince themselves to love. What happens if I leave? She asked. I cannot answer that. Why not? Because I do not know your life. I paused. But I know what happens if you marry someone you do not want to marry. Claire looked at me carefully. Do you? For a moment I thought about all the deals I had watched people make throughout my life. Partnerships. Promises. Commitments built on obligation rather than conviction. They rarely ended well. Yes, I said simply. Ido. The rain finally began to slow. The steady downpour softened into a gentle drizzle. Water dripped from the edges of the stone archway. Claire stared down at the wedding ring box still resting in her hands. Her fingers tightened around it. Then she took a deep breath. Another. Then another. Like someone learning how to breathe again. Suddenly footsteps echoed somewhere nearby. Both of us turned. A young bridesmaid appeared at the entrance of the courtyard. She looked frantic. Relieved. Exhausted. Claire. The woman rushed toward us. Oh my God. Everyone is looking for you. Claire froze immediately. All the fear returned. The bridesmaid stopped a few feet away and lowered her voice. The ceremony was supposed to start 20 minutes ago. Her eyes moved briefly toward me before returning to Claire. Your father is worried. Claire looked down. I know. Then come on. The bridesmaid reached for her hand. Let us go. Silence followed. 1 heartbeat. 2. 3. Then Claire slowly stepped backward instead of forward. The bridesmaid frowned. Claire. Another step backward. Then another. Tears filled Claire's eyes again, but this time they looked different. Not helpless. Determined. She opened the velvet ring box one final time. Stared at it. Closed it. Then looked directly at her friend. I cannot do this. The bridesmaid's face went pale. What? Claire's voice trembled, but she did. Not look away. I cannot marry him. The words echoed through the courtyard like thunder. And judging by the stunned expression on the bridesmaid's face, the shockwave was only beginning. The courtyard remained silent long after Claire spoke. Even the rain seemed to pause. The bridesmaid stared at her as if she had suddenly begun speaking another language. You cannot be serious. Claire swallowed hard but held her ground. I am. The woman shook her head immediately. No. You are overwhelmed. You are nervous. Her voice became more urgent. This happens. Every bride gets scared. Claire looked down at the ring box in her hands. Then she slowly closed it. That is not what this is. The bridesmaid glanced toward the church. Everyone is waiting. I know. Then come inside. I cannot. The conversation felt less like an argument and more like two people standing on opposite sides of a bridge that no longer existed. Eventually the bridesmaid's expression changed from confusion to realization. She finally understood this was not a temporary panic attack. Claire had already made her decision. She just had not admitted it until now. Your father is going to be devastated, she whispered. Pain flashed across Claire's face. That wound landed exactly where expected. I know. And Ethan. For the first time the groom had a name. Claire closed her eyes briefly. I know. The bridesmaid looked helpless. Then why are you doing this? Claire opened her eyes again. When she answered, her voice was calm, stronger than before. Because if I walk into that church today, I will spend the rest of my life wondering why I did not listen to myself. The honesty stunned everyone present, including me. The bridesmaid stared at her for several seconds. Then she slowly nodded. Not because she agreed, because she finally understood. What do you want me to tell them? She asked quietly. Claire's eyes filled with tears once more. Tell them I am sorry. The bridesmaid exhaled heavily. Then she turned and walked back toward the church entrance. Halfway there she stopped, looked over her shoulder. For what it is worth, she said softly, I think you are the bravest person I know. Right now. Then she disappeared inside. The moment she was gone, Claire's entire body relaxed. Not completely. Just enough to reveal how much tension she had been carrying. She leaned against the stone wall and covered her face with both hands. It is done. Her voice trembled. It is actually done. I waited. Some moments should not be interrupted. After a minute she looked up at me. Why are you still here? The question surprised me. Should I not be? A small laugh escaped her. Most people would have left by now. Most people are smarter than me. That earned another laugh. Genuine this time. The first one untouched by fear. The sound echoed softly through the courtyard. Then reality began returning. "What happens now?" she asked. It was a fair question. The wedding was over before it had begun. 300 guests sat inside a church waiting for explanations. Her entire future had just become uncertain. Yet strangely, she looked less afraid than before. "What do you want to happen?" I asked. Claire thought about it. Really thought about it. For perhaps the first time all day. Honestly. She stared beyond the courtyard walls toward the city skyline hidden behind gray clouds. "I want to disappear for a little while." Then she laughed nervously. "That probably sounds ridiculous." "No," I looked toward the church doors. "It sounds human." Claire smiled faintly. Then a sudden gust of wind swept through the courtyard. Something slipped from her hand and landed near my feet. A wedding invitation. The paper had become damp from the rain. I picked it up automatically. The elegant gold lettering was still visible. Claire Bennett and Ethan Collins. Saturday, September 14th. I started to hand it back. Then I noticed something written in blue ink on the inside flap. 3 words. Not in the groom's handwriting. Not part of the invitation. Just 3 words written years ago by someone who knew her. "Choose your own life." The words remained in my mind long after I handed the invitation back to Claire. Choose your own life. 3 simple words. Yet somehow they felt larger than the wedding she had just walked away from. Claire stared at the damp invitation for several seconds before carefully closing it. Her fingers traced the blue handwriting almost unconsciously. "My mother wrote that." Her voice softened immediately. "Years ago." I looked at her. "Your mother?" She nodded. "She used to leave little notes everywhere." A faint smile appeared despite everything. Inside books, kitchen drawers, birthday cards. Her eyes remained fixed on the invitation. She always said people spend too much time becoming who they are expected to be. The smile faded slightly, and not enough time becoming who they actually are. The rain had almost stopped now. Gray clouds still covered the city, but streaks of sunlight were beginning to appear beyond them. For the first time all afternoon, the storm seemed to be ending. Claire slipped the invitation into her bag. Then reality returned all at once. I should probably turn off my phone. I raised an eyebrow. That bad? She held up the screen. 23 missed calls. 14 text messages. Several voicemails. More arriving every minute. That answers my question. Claire laughed nervously. I do not think anyone is celebrating my decision. Probably not today. She looked at me carefully. Do you think I made a mistake? It was the first time she had asked directly. I considered the question before answering. I think marrying someone you do not want to marry would have been a mistake. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. That is what I thought too. We left the courtyard together a few minutes later. The church parking lot remained crowded. Guests were beginning to leave in small groups. Conversations filled the air. Curious glances followed Claire wherever she went. Yet something had changed. She no longer looked like someone running away. She looked like someone walking toward something she could not see yet. There is a difference. My driver was waiting near the curb. His expression revealed that my 5-minute detour had become significantly longer. Claire noticed him immediately. You really do have somewhere important to be, do not you? Usually. And today? I glanced at the church behind us. Apparently not. That earned another smile. The kind that appeared more often. Now, less forced. More genuine. For a moment neither of us seemed certain what happened next. She no longer had a wedding to attend. I no longer had a reason to remain there. Yet walking away felt strangely unfinished. Then Claire looked toward a small coffee shop across the street. Can I ask you something? Of course. What does a woman do after canceling her own wedding? I followed her gaze toward the coffee shop window glowing warmly against the gray afternoon. I imagine coffee is a reasonable place to start. 30 minutes later, we sat across from each other beside a window overlooking the city. Claire had exchanged her veil for a borrowed coat from the shop owner. Her wedding dress remained impossible to ignore, but somehow she looked more comfortable than before. More herself. We talked. Not about the wedding. Not about Ethan. Not even about the church. We talked about books, travel, childhood memories. The kind of conversation that happens when two strangers unexpectedly stop pretending. Hours seemed to pass in minutes. Eventually Claire became quiet. She stared out the window at people hurrying down the sidewalk. "You know what scares me most?" she asked. "What?" Her reflection looked back at her from the glass. "I have absolutely no idea what my life looks like tomorrow." The honesty in her voice was impossible to miss. Then she turned toward me. And somehow that feels terrifying and exciting at the same time. Before I could answer, her phone vibrated again. This time, instead of ignoring it, she looked at the screen. Her expression changed immediately. Not fear. Not sadness. Something closer to shock. Slowly, she placed the phone on the table and looked directly at me. "That message," she whispered, "changes everything." For several seconds, Claire simply stared at the screen. The coffee shop around us continued moving as if nothing had happened. Cups clinked against saucers. Conversations drifted through the warm afternoon air. A barista called someone's name near the counter. Yet none of it seemed to reach her. She looked frozen. "Claire?" I asked. Her eyes slowly lifted toward mine. "It is from my mother." The statement made no sense at first. Claire's mother had passed away years earlier. She had already told me that much. Seeing the confusion on my face, she quickly shook her head. "Not directly." She looked back at the phone. "A scheduled email." My attention sharpened immediately. Claire opened the message and stared at it for another moment before speaking. "My mother used to write letters for important milestones." Her voice softened. "Birthdays, graduations, big life events." She swallowed hard. "I completely forgot." The emotion in her eyes was impossible to miss. "Forgot what?" "That she created an email account before she died." A small laugh escaped her. She was convinced I would never check it. For the first time since receiving the message, a smile appeared. Fragile but genuine. Looks like she was right. Slowly, Claire began reading. I could tell immediately that every word mattered. Her expression shifted from surprise to sadness. Then from sadness to something else. Relief, hope, understanding. Tears filled her eyes once more, but they were different from the tears behind the church. These were not born from fear. When she finally lowered the phone, neither of us spoke for several seconds. "What did she say?" I asked gently. Claire looked down at the screen. "She said that if I am reading this, it means I am standing at a crossroads." Her voice trembled slightly. "And that whenever that day comes, I should remember something." She paused, then smiled through the tears. "A life built to satisfy everyone else eventually stops feeling like your own." The words landed with remarkable precision, almost as if her mother had somehow been sitting beside us all afternoon. Claire laughed softly and wiped her eyes. "That sounds exactly like her." The tension I had seen in her since the church began fading. Not disappearing completely, but loosening, like knots finally coming undone. "There is more," she said. "Read it." She shook her head. No, a warm smile appeared. "Some parts belong to me." Fair enough. Outside the coffee shop, the storm had finally passed. Sunlight broke through the clouds and painted the wet streets in gold. People emerged from buildings carrying umbrellas they no longer needed. The city seemed brighter than it had a few hours earlier. Claire noticed it too. "You know what is strange?" she asked. "What?" She looked out the window. "This morning I thought today was the most important day of my life. And now?" Her smile widened slightly. "Now I think it might just be the first day of it." We sat there for another hour talking about things neither of us had expected to discuss with a stranger. Dreams she abandoned, places she wanted to visit, books she never had time to read. Small details. Important details. The kind that reveal who someone actually is beneath expectations and obligations. By evening, the wedding dress had dried enough that it no longer looked ruined. Just different. Like its owner. Eventually Claire glanced at the clock. "I should go." The words carried a surprising amount of reluctance. "Do you have somewhere to be?" I asked. She laughed. "For the first time in years, no." That answer made both of us smile. Outside, my driver waited beside the car. The city glowed beneath the setting sun. Claire stood on the sidewalk holding her phone, her invitation, and a future she had not expected to have. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For asking the question nobody else asked." Her eyes met mine. It changed everything. Before I could respond, another notification appeared on her phone. This time the color drained from her face immediately. She stared at the screen in disbelief. Then she looked up at me. "I do not understand. What happened?" Claire turned the phone toward me. The message came from a law office. The subject line contained only 6 words. "Regarding your mother's private trust." Claire and I stood on the sidewalk as the city moved around us. The setting sun reflected across glass buildings and rain-soaked streets, turning everything gold. Yet all of my attention remained fixed on the phone in her hand. "Regarding your mother's private trust." Claire read the message again as if different words might appear the second time. "I have never heard of this." Her voice sounded distant. "Not once." I glanced at the sender. A law firm downtown. Legitimate. Established. The kind of firm that did not send messages by accident. "What does it say?" Slowly she opened the email. Her eyes moved across the screen. Confusion turned into surprise. Then disbelief. "They want me to come in tomorrow morning." "Why?" Claire swallowed hard. "Apparently my mother created a trust before she died." The evening traffic hummed around us. "And," she looked up, "and it was supposed to be transferred after my wedding." That detail immediately caught my attention. "After your wedding?" Claire nodded. "That is what it says." She stared at the screen again. "But because the wedding did not happen, they need to review additional instructions." For a moment neither of us spoke. Then a short laugh escaped her. "This day keeps getting stranger." I smiled slightly. "That is one way to describe it." She shook her head in disbelief. "I thought I was leaving a church with nothing." Her fingers tightened around the phone. Now apparently my mother left behind something nobody ever mentioned. The thought seemed to affect her more emotionally than financially. I understood why. Money can solve problems. A message from someone you lost can change your life. "Will you go?" I asked. Claire looked toward the skyline. "Of course." Then a softer smile appeared. "Even if I am terrified." The next morning arrived bright and unusually clear. The storm had disappeared completely. Sunlight poured through downtown Chicago as if the previous day had never happened. When I arrived at the law office, Claire was already standing outside. She wore a simple navy dress she had purchased that morning. No wedding gown. No ball. No expectations. Somehow she looked more confident than she had the entire day before. "You came," she said. "You sounded like you could use moral support." Her smile widened. "That is probably true." Together we entered the building. The office occupied the 23rd floor. Quiet hallways. Polished wood. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. A receptionist greeted us and led Claire into a conference room. Several minutes later, an elderly attorney entered carrying a large folder. His expression immediately softened when he saw her. "Miss Bennett." Claire stood. "You knew my mother." The attorney smiled warmly. "For nearly 20 years. Emotion flickered across her face. The man placed the folder on the table and opened it carefully. "Your mother was a remarkable woman." Claire looked down. "She was." The attorney nodded. "Which is precisely why she planned so far ahead." He removed a sealed envelope from the folder. Claire froze the moment she saw it. Her name was written across the front in handwriting she recognized instantly. The room became completely silent. "What is that?" she whispered. The attorney smiled gently. "Your mother instructed us to give you this letter when you finally chose your own future." Claire stared at the envelope as tears filled her eyes. Because suddenly she realized something extraordinary. Years before her death, her mother had somehow anticipated this exact moment. Claire stared at the envelope as though it had traveled across time itself. The handwriting on the front was unmistakable. Her mother's handwriting. Careful. Elegant. Familiar. The kind of handwriting a person never forgets. For several seconds she simply held it without moving. The attorney remained silent. So did I. Some moments deserve room to breathe. Finally, Claire slid a finger beneath the seal and opened it carefully. Inside was a single folded letter. The paper looked older than everything else in the room, as though it had been waiting years for this exact day. Her hands trembled slightly as she unfolded it. Then she began reading. At first, her expression remained neutral, focused. Then her eyes widened. Tears appeared almost immediately afterward. The attorney quietly excused himself and stepped outside, leaving us alone. Claire continued reading, line after line, word after word. The room remained silent except for the distant sounds of the city beyond the windows. Eventually she reached the end. She lowered the letter slowly and stared at nothing for several moments. What did she say? I asked softly. Claire laughed through her tears. Too much. Her voice cracked. And exactly what I needed. She looked back down at the paper. She wrote this 10 years ago. A smile appeared. 10 years. She shook her head in disbelief. And somehow she knew me better than I know myself. Carefully, she reread part of the letter aloud. If you are reading this, it means you finally chose courage over comfort. Her voice trembled. It means you stopped living the life other people designed for you. She paused. And if that day ever comes, I want you to know how proud I am. Claire covered her mouth as tears slipped down her cheeks. Not tears of grief. Tears of recognition. The kind that appear when someone finally feels understood. Even by someone who is no longer there. After a few minutes, she folded the letter and placed it back inside the envelope. There is something else. What? She looked toward the conference table where the trust documents remained open. The trust. I had nearly forgotten about it. The attorney returned shortly afterward and resumed his seat. Your mother included specific instructions, he explained. The trust was always yours. Claire frowned. Then why was it connected to my wedding? The attorney smiled gently. It was not. Confusion crossed her face. He opened another document. The transfer date happened to coincide with your wedding date. Claire blinked. That is it. That is it. Relief appeared instantly. Then curiosity. What exactly is in the trust? The attorney slid several papers toward her. Claire began reading. The amount was significant. Life-changing for many people. Yet what caught her attention was not the number. It was something else entirely. A small property listed among the assets. Wait. She pointed to the page. This address. The attorney nodded. Your mother purchased that building years ago. Claire looked stunned. I know this place. You do. She smiled through her disbelief. It is a bookstore. Suddenly she laughed. The genuine bright laugh of someone seeing a forgotten piece of a puzzle. My mother used to take me there every Saturday. The attorney nodded again. She left specific instructions regarding the property. Claire looked down at the final page. Then her eyes widened. No way. What? I asked. She turned toward me. The excitement in her face was impossible to miss. She wanted it converted into a community space. Her smile grew even larger. A bookstore and reading center. The dream sounded remarkably similar to stories Claire had shared the day before. Dreams she thought were impossible. Dreams she had quietly abandoned. Then she looked at me with disbelief shining in her eyes. I spent years trying to build the future everyone else wanted. Her voice softened. And somehow my mother spent years protecting the future I actually wanted. For the first time since leaving the church, Claire looked completely free. Then the attorney handed her one final note attached to the documents. A short handwritten message from her mother. Only one sentence. Start when you are ready, not when you are afraid. The note remained in Claire's hands long after the meeting ended. Start when you are ready, not when you are afraid. We left the law office carrying far more than documents. Claire carried answers. The kind people spend years searching for. Outside the city felt different. Or perhaps she did. We walked several blocks without speaking. The afternoon sun reflected from windows high above the streets. People hurried past us with places to go and plans to follow. Claire finally stopped in front of an old bookstore on a quiet corner. The same building listed in the trust documents. The same place her mother had loved. She stared through the glass for a long time. Dusty shelves stretched toward the back wall. A handwritten sign hung near the entrance. The owner was retiring at the end of the month. Claire laughed softly. I used to sit right there. She pointed toward a reading chair near the front window. Every Saturday. Her eyes filled with emotion. My mother would spend hours here. I looked at the building, then at Claire. For the first time since meeting her, I saw certainty instead of confusion. Weeks passed, then months. Life did not suddenly become perfect. There were permits to secure, renovations to complete, decisions to make. Yet every challenge seemed different because the direction was finally her own. The bookstore slowly transformed into something new. Books remained. Stories remained. But reading rooms appeared. Community spaces appeared. Children's programs appeared. Everywhere you looked, traces of Claire's vision replaced years of hesitation. Throughout it all, we remained part of each other's lives. Not because either of us planned it. Because some people arrive unexpectedly and somehow become impossible to imagine losing. One evening nearly a year later, I stood across the street watching lights glow inside the completed building. The grand opening had ended hours earlier. Most guests had gone home. The city had grown quiet. Through the front window, I could see Claire organizing books on a shelf. She looked happy. Truly happy. Not the version of happiness people perform for photographs. The real kind. The kind that settles into a person's eyes. When she noticed me outside, she smiled and motioned for me to come in. The familiar scent of books filled the air as I entered. Warm lighting reflected across polished wooden floors. Children had left handwritten notes on a community board. Families had already donated hundreds of books. Life filled every corner of the space. What do you think? Claire asked. I looked around carefully. I think your mother would be proud. Emotion softened her expression. I hope so. Then she handed me something. A framed piece of paper. Inside was the original note from the wedding invitation. Choose your own life. I stared at the words. You kept it. It changed everything. She smiled. Besides, it belongs here. Together we hung the frame near the entrance where every visitor would see it. For several moments we simply stood there, looking at the words, looking at the life built from them. Finally Claire glanced toward the window where evening lights shimmered across the city. You know something? She asked. What? Her smile grew. A year ago I thought losing a wedding meant losing my future. She looked around the bookstore, then back at me. Now I realize it was the day I finally found it. I followed her gaze across the room filled with stories, possibilities, and second chances. And for the first time I understood something too. Fate does not always arrive with certainty. Sometimes it arrives as a storm. Sometimes as a difficult choice. Sometimes as a stranger behind a church asking a question nobody else thought to ask. And sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is choose a life that finally feels like their own.